Hi, booktube, welcome to Jackie's Lyric Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm going to do a video that was inspired by Mike from Mike's book reviews. I watched his video on chunkers that he's read and loved. Now, as you guys know, I'm not that hard to please when it comes to reading. I mean, I basically, if I'm not interested, then I'm not going to read it. Like, I'm not going to be someone who's going to just try it, because, I mean, there are some older, books with the classics label that I might try. And then there are some books that I'm somewhat, a tiny bit interested in that aren't normally my kind of thing. But that's about it. Like, I don't read romance because I prefer to watch romance. I don't read thrillers. I don't read, and there's certain, there's definitely certain genres that I prefer just to watch them than read them. But I wanted to go ahead and talk to you about my chunky books I've read and absolutely loved. Which is most of the chunky books I've read are probably books that I've loved, because it just feels like there's so much in big books have to offer people. So there's so much story, so much character, and just I love chunky books. It takes me a long time to read them because I'm so used to reading shorter works or YA books that I get through a lot faster, even if they are chunky books. You know, like Harry Potter or Sarah J. Maas's works. I get through those pretty quickly because they're very fast paced. There's always something going on. I mean, there are slow moments in all those books, but it's mostly very fast paced and exciting. You just want to know what's going on, and there's those scenes that you just want to keep turning the pages and reading them and want to know what's going to happen next, whether it's a romance scene or, a scene with a bad guy or something. You just want to keep going. While adult books, they can be a little slower at times. So let's talk about all the chunky books that I've read and loved. So first, I want to go ahead and talk to you guys. Go ahead and get this one out of the way, because this is one that I know lately it's been brought to, the last few years, last 10 years, it's been brought to people's attention that this book has some problematic elements. So I agree, there are aspects of it that aren't great, and it is glorifying a time period that maybe it shouldn't, but this time period did exist, it did happen, unfortunately, and now the way they wrote about a certain group of people, the way they're portrayed in here is not great, but that is Gone with the Wind. Now, this is not my original copy. Originally, I had a mass market copy, which I donated to Given Bookshop. But I kept this. This is the copy, even though it's kind of battered a little bit. This is the copy I kept because this was a gift from my grandmother to my mom when she was a teenager. So, or a young adult. I have to check what year. It was 1974, so she might have been a teenager at the time. Or at least but yeah, this was her copy, the copy my grandmother gave to my mom, maybe as a birthday or Christmas gift. I don't know. So, and my grandma signed it and everything, so I've kept this copy, even though it's battered and it's a hardback book. I prefer reading paperback. But I did start rereading this one. I didn't get very far, though. I got as far as the part, I think I'm only on chapter 2, actually. I'm not very far into it. But, I mean, I've already read the whole thing, obviously. That's why it's on this list. So, yes, there are problems with this, but I love Scarlett's story. And, she's a character that you just... And Mike also talked about this book on his list. She's the character you just can't stand, and you want to smack her and shake her and just strangle her because she's so selfish and she's so vain. She's just a spoiled little brat. But at the same time, she works so hard to survive and to get what she wants. She's a fighter and a survivor, and you kind of admire her and respect her. Even though the way she goes about things is messed up. She steals her sister's boyfriend at one point, or the guy that her sister wanted to marry, and marries him for the sake of survival and having security and everything. Scarlett marries this guy. She doesn't even love him. she doesn't even care about him. She's just like, he has a business. You know, I need this business. I need his money to survive. And just like, you gotta admire her in some way, you know. And a lot of times those characters are so much more interesting than the characters that are super good to read about. Like a whole story about Melanie Wilkes might not be as, even though I do love Melanie a lot, and she's so sweet and kind and caring. She's the only person who sees the good in Scarlet and is always supporting her, and is just refuses to see Scarlet's negative traits. Like, I think she does that with everybody. Won't see their bad, will always see their good in them. But if it was a story all about her, then I don't know. Unless she got became a more complicated character. Like, if someone did a spin-off where they added more to her character, like took what already was there and expanded her character and made her a little complex, then maybe it could work. I would be interested to see that, if someone could do that. Like, I don't know if this book, now people can write spin-off books. I mean, I think they can, because then there's books like Rhett's People and everything. There's all these books. And then someone wrote that sequel, Scarlet, which I actually liked. I know not everybody loved that one, and it can't compare to the original Gone with the Wind, but I actually kind of liked it. But I just, you know, if there was a story from her perspective, it might be a little more hard to make her a compelling character like Scarlet is. Because people love reading, people don't like reading about goody two-shoes characters. That's boring. People want to read about flawed, messed up, dysfunctional characters. That's so much more interesting because you get to see them grow and hopefully they become better people. And that's like Scarlet, and we want to see her grow and become a better person. And I think that's why the sequel tried to do that, make her a better person, make her grow as a character. I'd be curious to see people's reviews on Scarlet so I can understand why people don't love it as much. I mean, like I said, there's the obvious fact that you're trying to compare it to this one. But I would be curious to hear what people specifically didn't like about it. Because I actually liked it. I mean, but I didn't love it so much that I will feel defensive if people don't love it. So, yeah, Gone with the Wind. And then Margaret Mitchell's writing is so beautiful. Writing about this glorified version of the South. You know, you almost feel bad for these people, but then, of course, you see how they treat their black slaves, and it's like, yeah, you know, it's like, I don't feel sorry for you anymore. Yeah, that's the aspect of the people that people don't look at now, and they're like, oh, that's make this a little questionable. But so I wanted to get this one out of the way, because I still kind of love this one. This is not my favorite cover, but I mean, like, there's a new paperback edition that I've seen at Barnes & Noble that's the same size as this, that I really like, but like I said, I feel like I can't have multiple copies. I don't have the shelf space. And, I mean, I do have space right now, but I would rather use it to buy new books than buy multiple copies of the same book. And then this also, you know, I'm not going to ever get rid of this one because this has inscription this was my mom's book from her mother, my grandmother. So I feel like I should keep it. And then maybe one day pass it on. Like, pass it on to, you know, if my niece or nephews are interested in it. Because I do think boys can, you know, read a book like this because it's also a war book. It's about the Civil War as well. Okay, then we have another classic. And this is another one I'm starting to do a reread of this one. And that is Bleak House by Dickens. First of all, I love Dickens' writing. I mean, I can understand why he can get tedious and a little too detailed. And the characters are a bit exaggerated, and that's not for everybody. But this story of this court case is so fascinating. It lasts for years, this court case. And, like Jane Eyre, who is complete opposite of Scarlett O'Hara, where she's just a good, very moral person. Esther Summerson is also a very good, moral person. And she's had a hard life. I mean, she was taken from her mom, and her mom didn't want her because it would, you know, she kind of had her out of wedlock. and she's just trying to be good and a strong moral person, as good as possible. And so you kind of admire her for that, trying to be a good person. And then once again, I love Dickens's characters. They're always so fun to read about, like Miss Jellyby or Jellyby. I never know how to say her name. Her obsession with Africa, and then but while at the expense of her family, she's like a terrible mom. She just ignores her kids. I'm just so like, and I'm all for going on adventures, exploring the world, and protecting the world and everything. But I definitely have mixed feelings about that plot point. I think Dickens is still judgy of her. Does judge her a bit. And it's such a really fun read, and I can't really explain why I love this book. I do need to reread it. But it's hard to pick a favorite with Dickens. It's easier for me to say what my least favorite is. My least favorites are like, one of them is Hard Times, and even then that's not saying like I hated it, because there were aspects of it that I liked, and I liked when it talked about but I definitely want to reread this one again. But it's hard for me to reread these books because they take such a big commitment. They're so long, but I just absolutely enjoyed this book. It was so much fun and so cozy, and I think this year's a good time to read it. But yeah, that is Bleak House. Sorry, I don't have a lot to say about it. It's been a while since I read it, but I just remember really loving it. Okay, which, by the way, this list, these books, unlike Mike's book review, on Mike's video went into more 1,000-page mark, my video was going to include books that are 500 at the 500-page mark. Not just, So there's a couple of books that look a little bit shorter than his books, than the books he's talked about. So then we have another classic that he also mentioned. He didn't mention Bleak House, but this is another one he mentioned, which is The Count of Monte Cristo. I love this book. This was so great. It's a revenge story, and it's so thrilling, and it's so fascinating. You want to keep going reading this. I want to find out what the Count is going to do next. And just like, Edmund's journey in, trying to get revenge on the people that betrayed him. And just the elaborate schemes and plans he commits to, and, just spending time with these characters and seeing their lives unfold and slowly get ruined by this man who, they screwed over. And it's just like, you just want to keep going. You just want to know what happens next, It has its slow moments, and there were times when I read it, I was like, okay, what does this have to do with his revenge plan? And I think almost everything in this was important. There was at least one aspect of it, like the Count's relationship with, I can't remember the one woman's name, the woman he hired to, I think he rescued her at one point and took her in, and then, I can't remember her name, Haiti, that's her name. That relationship was a little odd to me. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, because that became a romance, and so that whole relationship was a little very weird to me, and it's, I kind of felt weird about that relationship. I did talk about why I think this could be a TV series, or maybe a mini-series, or a limited one. I don't know if mini-series and limited are the same thing, but I did do a video on that. And again, this is another one that I've started to reread, especially because I got this new copy of it, because my copy was perfectly fine, it was just a little damaged. More damaged than usual. It was the Oxford edition, and I almost wish I had kept it. But again, I can't keep multiple copies of my favorite books. I don't have the shelf space. And I would rather use the little bit that I have for new books. And I'm still trying to find myself going through and picking and taking books off my shelf that I've decided I don't want to keep. But yeah, I love this story. It's so great, so riveting, and definitely worth checking out for for classics. And I did get another Dumas book recently. The one that's based on the Moulin Rouge, the movie Moulin Rouge. That's not what the book is called, but that movie Moulin Rouge is what was the book that movie is based on. Is a novel by Alexander Dumas. I still go read his Three Musketeers, and then there's the sequel to it, The Iron Mask. And I think there might be another sequel to that book. So, but I'm gonna go. But yeah, I love this. This was so good. Okay, let's talk about one that's a little short. One of my shorter ones. This is about just over the 500 page mark. And that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am also surprised that they didn't adapt this one. And they didn't choose to adapt this one. That they chose to adapt The Goldfinch first. But maybe that's what, maybe that's what Donna Tartt wanted and preferred that one to be adapted first. Or maybe she doesn't want this to be adapted at all. We don't know. But this was, again, another one that I've started to reread. All these big books, a lot of them I've started to reread this one. But this is so good. It's was my first dark academia book. And there's a murder and these pretentious kids studying Greek and thinking they're better than everybody else. And I always love stories where you have a main character that's a generally good person, and then they get mixed up in a group of pretentious people, and they get mixed up in all this trouble and all this drama and everything. It was such a page-turning read. It was so fascinating reading about these people. I love reading about pretentious, rich, snobby people. It's so much fun to read, and just seeing them try to get away with shit, and they almost do. And it's just watching them fall from grace. You rise so high, but then you fall so far, basically. And just, this story is so fascinating. And it was, and again, I love Donna Tartt's writing. She's an author whose writing I absolutely love. But yeah, this is so good and so page-turning. And I know it's not for everybody, and you're either a Goldfinch fan or you're The Secret History fan. I tried to like both, but I just lost interest in the Goldfinch. And so, yeah, but I love this one. And I definitely recommend it for dark academia. But it's a slow book, so. Okay, so another, a little bit shorter, and that is one that I read last year, and that is The Historian by Elizabeth Costovo. If you're a history person and you like Dracula and everything, you might love this one. It's the whole idea of what if Dracula was a real person and he was still alive, and it's basically taking the Dracula myth and mixing it with the whole belief that Vlad Dracul, the emperor, was, that belief was actually true. And because for the longest time, that's what people believed, that Vlad Dracul, Vlad the Impaler, was who Bram Stoker based Dracula on. But I did read Dracul, which has an author note at the end of the book that says that what he based the character on was not this person. People just believed that he based it on Vlad the Impaler because of his bloodthirsty nature, but that's not what he based on. And he actually, like, according to Dracul, written by Dagger Stoker, and I can't remember the other author that worked with him, but in the author's note, that wasn't the case. He said that Bram Stoker actually believed vampires were real, and he was trying to warn people with his novel. But then his literary agent was like, no, people are already scared as it is. Because I think it was around the time of the Black Death or something. Something world event was going on when he wrote it. And, oh wait, no, it was because he wrote in the 1800s, so there was no Black Death. There was something going on in the world that made people paranoid and scared. So he was like, don't make them even more scared and think vampires are real. So just fictionalize it. Which I would love to see have that conversation with. But they're kind of this book is taking the whole Vlad the Impaler scenario in, like, that whole belief is inspiring this book, and it's like, now there's not a lot of vampire action, but it's still such a fascinating read, where this woman is taking the mantle of her father because her father's gone missing, and try to find Dracula, and it's just like, it's again like perfect time of year to read this book. It's really hard to explain, but it feels such a cozy read. So, like, it's like there's some books that just give me this cozy feeling, this warm, fuzzy feeling when I read them around this time of year. It's hard to really explain what the feeling I get when I read like something like this. But just hearing, and it's a story within a story within a story, and just there is still some vampire action, of course, but not a lot. Like I said, there's romance in the story, although I prefer the romance between the second romance. I don't know if it will be the first the romance, the love story that our narrator's dad experiences. I prefer that love story over the love story that our narrator goes through, and then there's another love story as well that's introduced. So there's kind of 3 main romances in the story, but they don't take over the plot either. The plot still focuses on the mystery and finding Dracula and trying to escape the other vampires, like the vampire minions that he might have sent after them. And all the research they do, and just it's so cool and so fascinating to read about. And like I said, if you're a Dracula fan, you might like this. But I just absolutely love this. So this goes into the 600 page mark. So it's a bit over the 500 pages. But I just love this book. Okay. Then we have my first Joe Hill read, and that is Nosferatu. Oh, that reminds me. I should check and see if this one is ever on Netflix, because I know Anne Rice's series are on Netflix. This is kind of a vampire story, but it takes a different approach to vampires. Joe Hill does something really different with vampires. His vampire is focused mostly on children, and it's like, again, Joe Hill's the son of Stephen King, and I feel guilty for comparing him, but he does similar things to his father, where he really focuses on characters, and you get to know the characters, the main ones, and really understand them and why they are the way they are, and you see their lives, or how their lives, like, you see our main character Victoria, and see how her life is going, and how what happened to her as a kid has basically ruined her life, and she's been traumatized by this experience with this monster, this literal monster, for years. And I like how he does a different approach to vampires, and like it's not just the biting of the neck. It's, I don't know, it's like the way he feeds off these kids is very different. It's hard to explain it. I don't even understand it myself how it all works. But sometimes you don't want to understand. You just want to keep going. You just want to keep going and reading. And like it's like you don't need to understand. You just need to read the book. And there is, and actually that's the other thing I noticed. He looks like his dad. I haven't seen a picture of Owen though, so I should look at Owen and see if Owen looks like Stephen King. But and it also takes for those people who love stories that kind of do a twist on Christmas, kind of do a more creepy twist on Christmas. That this is another one, and I did talk about this as a winter read or a spooky read, like an autumn read, because it does take place during the summer, so I guess you can read it during the summer too. But I mean, you could read this all year round. But it does, it looks at Christmas and does a creepy spin on Christmas because the bad guy loves Christmas for some twisted reason. And it's such a twisted book and so absolutely terrifying because they have, they have the literal monster, but they also have this human character, Bing, who's such a monster in his own way that he's just so terrifying. And the things he does to the people, to the parents, is just sick and twisted and just like it's just such a like something about this book is just something so riveting for a horror book. But yeah, that is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. Okay, and then we have Imaginary Friend by Steven Chbosky. Again, another one that really looks at real human horrors, but also looks at epic horrors like good versus evil. And you have this young boy who is, his mom's trying to escape an abusive situation, and this boy is caught in the middle. And he's, and he ends up being, they try to escape, and he ends up being used for forces of evil. Like, he ends up being used. He's just a kid. And, so it really explores childhood and the struggles of being in a situation, and being a single mom and trying to protect her child as best you can. And the things that kids see that adults can't see. And it's just, again, another really great story. Like, I love how it looks at good versus evil through a child's eyes. And it's just it's so good, it was so good. I really absolutely love this. And then we have another classic, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. Again, another very slow, the day-to-day life of this little village town, and the marriages that the women in this town make, and the choices they make, and and this is a very cozy read, and just a kind of a comfort read. I think this is perfect for this time of year when you're just staying inside and just want a cozy, wholesome read. Like I said, it's just the day-to-day life of these women and the choices, and again, the choices they make. So it's not a super exciting story, but and I did get frustrated with Dorothea, one of the main women in that. in the story. Like, some of these characters you do get very frustrated and annoyed by. But it's such a beautiful story. I love her writing, and this is Kim from the middle of the book March's favorite book, and oh my god, I finally remembered her first name. She was one of those booktubers that I remember her channel name, but I could never remember that her name is Kim. I don't know why. Maybe looking at this book made me remember. I don't know, but this is another one that I've started to reread of. I love this. I love the cover, the pink cover, and I'm already. I don't know if it's because of me that I'm doing that. It must be me because I know people. Well, yeah, I guess it is because I do have a little bit of the cream colored stuff on my fingers. But I know that's why people don't always, if they buy the cloth bound, they buy the cloth bound and they buy a paperback edition because they don't want to have multiple copies. Because it's hard to read these copies because you're prone to ruin them a little bit, like the covers and everything. Looks like I'm already doing that. But anyway, this is such a beautiful story, like I said, not a lot going on, but it's so good, and I feel like I'm repeating myself. I don't know what to say. I just love it. Okay, then we have... Okay, so this is the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, and this is what the show was named after, A Game of Thrones. I love George R. R. Martin's world that he introduces in this book, and with all these complicated, complex, sometimes unlikable and sometimes lovable at the same time type characters in this world, and they're just all fighting for power and fighting over this stupid chair, and I'm like, that is going to be the most uncomfortable chair on the planet. Why would anyone want that, and why would anyone want that job? I mean, it's, of course, it's because of power, wanting to control everything. And it's just so interesting to spend time with all these characters and see what they have to do, and you just keep holding your breath, hoping that some of the characters all the characters are gonna come out of this alive, and they're all gonna, make it out and get their lives back. Like, especially the Stark family, and they're slowly dying out, the Starks. Luckily, not all of them die. There are a few family members of the Stark line will continue. But again, another page-turning story, and just such an amazing series. And don't let, the show going bad turn you off from the series. And I know that there's also the fact that George R. R. Martin is taking so long to write the last two books. But it's just sometimes. But I agree with the people that say that it's just worth reading the series. Being in this world, even if you don't ever get to the end of it. Like, just being in this world and everything, and, yes, I know that they had an ending in the show, but, and it taints the series for a lot of people, but for me, it doesn't taint the series. I still love the books, and I love these characters. And now I do use the actors as the faces for the characters now when I read the books. But it's just, the political intrigue is so fascinating, and just wondering what's going to happen next, and who's going to sit on the Iron Throne and everything. And just, and I don't know if George R. R. Martin, what happens in the TV shows, is he's going to keep the ending or if he's going to change things, because I know a lot of people were not happy. But I do think if he added some stuff, he can, with a book, he can do a lot more and really make the ending more believable than how it was in the show, if he keeps the show ending. But yeah, this was such an amazing story, amazing series. So far, then we have another epic fantasy series, and first of all, just the fact that I finally finished this first book was great, in such a triumph, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book of the Stormlight Archive series. Oh my god, I love this. You know, the Kaladin is such a sympathetic and fun character to read about. You know, you just feel for him, and you want him to succeed in life, you want him to survive and everything, and he's just, especially because he's the character who experienced depression, and his life has been so hard, so full of hardship, and life's kind of sucked over the years, and you just, and then just like, and I related so much to Shallan. I actually liked her character. I know some people like don't love her character, but I actually liked her. Maybe that's because I could relate to her the most. And Dalinar, and I know that each book that there's gonna be, you know, I'm wondering if Words of Radiance is gonna be Shallan's book, the book that's focused on, because each book, like this first one, mostly focused on Kaladin. So I'm wondering if Words of Radiance is gonna focus on Shallan, and then Oath, because Oathbringer or Oathbreaker, I think focuses on Dalinar. So I'm guessing that Words of Radiance focuses on Shallan. And oh my god, I love Syl. She's adorable. I love her character. She's so sweet, and just like she reminds me of Tinkerbell, in a lot of ways. And just, you know, this is so great. And of course, like everybody else, I love Bridge 4. Bridge 4 is awesome. But this again is such a fascinating story. Like Kaladin's journey is so great and fascinating. You know, really interesting to read about. And just the whole power system. One of Brandon Sanderson's specialties is magic systems that are so intricate. You know, this whole magic system that is controlled by weather, particularly storms, is really, again, really interesting and intriguing. And again, you know, I mean, my only problem is because I'm still not used to reading big books like this in one big go. You know, because I have that habit of putting these big chunky books down and then coming back to them a year or two later, or even longer than that. It's not because I'm not engaged in the story, it's just I get distracted by other books that won't take me as long to read. So it's something I definitely need to work on. Again, this is so good. And then we have another one that's a little bit shorter, and that is Crime and Punishment. And this could be potentially due to the fact that the timing of my reading of this. But this is like this is a story about a guy who commits a crime and kills someone that in his mind he's like, this person has done horrible things to others and doesn't deserve to live, so I'm doing the world a favor by getting rid of them. And that's fair and that's just. So, you know, it makes it not a bad thing that I did this. But then his conscience gets to him, and he's so paranoid he's going to get caught. So it kind of looks at right and wrong and the philosophy of that, and I don't know when this was written, like what was going on at the time in Russia, but again, you know, being in Raskolnikov's head is just crazy. You know, just hearing his rationalization and then his guilty conscience getting to him. Again, I'm trying. I can't think of any other better word than interesting, but I don't know what. Like I said, I don't know what other word to use. But like I said, it could have been just timing when I read this, but because back for years, this might not have gotten my interest. I might have got bored with this book, but reading this years later as an adult, it was the perfect timing for me because I was definitely really interested in this and reading more about this character, about Raskolnikov, his journey, and wondered, is he going to get caught? What's going to happen to his family and friends? Because we also get their stories, like his sister. There's a subplot with his sister and how, you know, there are 3 guys that are fighting to marry her via her affections, and only one of them she might actually love, and but yeah, so this is very philosophical. If you're a philosophical reader, a reader that likes to consider the character's thoughts and feelings and them to constantly debating them and trying to then, you know, you'll love this. But if you find that not as appealing, then I wouldn't recommend this book, because it gets very much inside Raskolnikov's head. Which, for if you don't love that kind of thing, then that could be frustrating and annoying. But yeah, this is so good, and I do want to reread this, but I haven't started rereading this one like some of these other books, because it is a slower book. But yeah, that is Crime and Punishment, my first Dostoevsky book. Okay, then we have this bad boy, Stephen King's It. I have 3 Stephen Kings on here, actually. Which I probably should have organized this a little bit better, rather than unlike the way that Mike did his. He organized his list, but oh my god, I love this book. This is my first Stephen King book I ever read and finished. This is, a group, this is about friendship, and you're facing your fears, and like, I feel like these kids are the Loser Club is so relatable, and you just connect with all of them. Ben is my favorite. Ben is my precious little bean, but I love all of them. There is a love triangle in this book, but it doesn't take over the story, and it's kind of a love triangle that you kind of root for. You kind of like the love triangle, and you don't hate either person in it. You're not annoyed by them, because, first of all, it doesn't take over the story, because you're dealing with, first kids, and then you're dealing with adults, but they have a bigger problem, which is this monster that's coming after them, this alien-like monster who's trying to kill everybody. And again, he, like Anne Rice, he deals with the history of his world, which I absolutely love. I think that's I love when novels include that kind of stuff. Even if it makes it super long. Because I love reading about the history and looking into archives and stuff. I don't get to do that on a regular basis, so I like seeing living vicariously through characters who do that. And that's part of why I love The Historian, because you have characters doing research. History research, not science research, but history research. The friendship between these 7 kids is so endearing, and you just root for them. You hope they survive. You don't want any of them to die. You just love them and want to protect them and take care of them. And I feel like these fears, a lot of people can relate to, like fear of the unknown, fear of monsters in your closet, or monsters under your bed, or the monsters from the movies coming out to get you, or fear of something that's really not right looking, that looks weird, and fear of all these fears that these kids go through. And it also looks at world fears, the fears that we have to do and deal with them in the real world. Like, the story starts with a gay young man getting attacked by people that they think he's trash and don't like that. That's how the story starts, to deal with that. So warning, if you are warning that it does start with that kind of scenario, so that might be a little too much for people. And then it has a lot of the elements that people just don't have a hard time, not everybody loves about Stephen King. Like certain words he uses, and just certain aspects, but anyway, the friendship between the Losers Club and then the monster is so creative and fun and terrifying. And this is the reason people this is part of why people don't love clowns. It's so good. I just love this book. This is another one I've started to reread, and I want to keep going with it, but I haven't, because I feel like I need to read other Stephen King books first, some more at least. But yeah, I love it. It is a classic. And then we have a more recent book that I finished, which again, another one of my reading for years, and that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This again is just so great. This is I love the idea of history, of historical periods that normally don't have magic fantasy elements in them, in those time periods, that you don't mix that with fantasy. I like you see there are certain time periods where you often see fantasy mixed in there, and I want to see, I like that we got a time period where you don't see fantasy mixed in there, and like the Napoleonic Wars. You like the idea of what if magic was real? What if there were real magicians, not just illusionists, but actually people could do magic? And that's what this is about. Like, it explores two competing magicians who have brought magic back into the real world. And that's what the story is. And it has a similar feel to a Jane Austen novel or a Dickens novel in the way it's written. And these characters, these two guys, they're arrogant and pretentious, but you kind of like them at the same time, but you kind of hate them also because of the way they treat other people and the way they treat each other at times. And I just love the concept of magic being real, and what if it was real? What if there were magicians, and what if there were fairies, and like it has a fae plot in there, and Suzanne, like all of her books, so far from I'm seeing she's really good at, writing. Well, although I've only read 2 books. I haven't even read the book that takes place in the same world. But there's both this book and the other one. Like, the writing feels like what it's about, if it makes sense. Like, this is written like it's from the Victorian era or the Regency era. Probably the Regency era more. While Paradesi writes more like a myth. Feels like it's written like a mythology. But yeah, this was so good. Such a page-turning story. Again, it's more me not being able to commit to bigger books rather than how interesting the book is, how engaging the book is. And just, oh my god, this is just so good if you're a fantasy fan. I mean, if you want a more fast-paced fantasy story, then this is not for you. But if you love fantasy and don't mind slower fantasy stories, then, that have some mundane moments, then this might be it. You might want to check it out. But I just love this book. Okay, now here are my other 2 Stephen King books that I want to talk about. Okay, well, 3. Actually, 3. I forgot there were 3. First is the classic, his take on Dracula. And that is Salem's Lot. Basically what inspired this book was, what if you found Dracula in suburbia? Now, this vampire is not Dracula. His name is Barlow, the vampire, this story. But it's just what he does best, which is small towns. Let me make sure this counts as a... Okay, yep, it does. Just checking. Because I've done that before where I've grabbed a book thinking it would count as a 500 plus page book, and then I look at it and it actually does it, and it just looks chunky. But, again, he just does small towns so well, and really, one of my other books I have here is also a small town story. So let me just talk about these together, because they're both small town story. There's Needful Things is the other one, and then Salem's Lot. And the idea of this small town slowly succumbing to the vampire that is here. And, there's one moment in the book that really stayed with me because this was a reread. One of the moments I remember that still stayed with me, and it's partly because of the movie adaptation. The one with Rob Lowe, not the one that came out in the 70s, but the more recent version that came out in early 2000s with Rob Lowe as Ben's character, and Samantha Mathis. But James Cromwell, or is it James Cromwell? Is that the actor's name? Because I don't know if I'm thinking about the Cromwell, the historical Cromwell, but is it? Yeah, I think his name is James Cromwell. The guy who plays the priest. He plays the priest in the movie, that movie adaptation. from the early 2000s. And it might be because of that adaptation that stayed in me. But the scene when Barlow goes after the priest and takes the priest, that scene always stayed with me for some reason. And I think because it was he was a man of God who had given up on faith, who lost his faith in God. And, like, that is absolutely terrifying to me. That is what stayed with me that moment when the vampire takes him. So that's a minor spoiler. That part has always stayed with me. I always remember that scene from the movie adaptation. I don't remember all the other stuff in the book, so I did decide to reread it a couple years ago. And I just love this book. And I think if you're a vampire fan, like, if you're tired of Twilight, you know, the Twilight stuff, then there are books like Twilight, read this one. You will love this if you're a vampire fan and want the whole traditional vampire, them being scary and monsters and killing people and all that. You know, you'll get that with this. Like, I'm more of I love both versions of vampires. I love the romanticized version and then this version. You know, because, I mean, which the beauty of Anne Rice is that I think she does that a little bit of both. There's a romanticized element, but she doesn't shy away from the horrors and, you know, the vampires. Because there's a romanticism to Louis Duloc. From, you know, Interview with the Vampire, there is a romanticism to him. I mean, there isn't, like, an epic romance, like, he doesn't fall for a mortal or anything, but a different, like, I don't mean that kind of romanticism, but, like, romantic, tragic hero type character. That's what I mean. But, like I said, if you love the more monster-like vampires, then please check this one out. If you haven't yet, this is so good. And it's just so terrifying. There's certain things, like, I know for most people the scene that stays with them is the infamous window scene. That's what terrifies people most. Like I said, what happens to the priest is what stays with me when I read this, when I saw, you know. But, oh my god, this is so good. And there's even an element of the haunted house in this story. But yeah, I love this. This is just, I don't know what more to say. It's so hard for me to talk about books that I love because I don't know what else to say. Like, it's easier to talk about books, like, that I hate, or books I'm like, oh, it's just okay. Okay, so the other small town story that focuses more on the town than that one does. That one focuses more on, you know, but this one focuses more on the town and stuff, and that is Needful Things, which I think has been adapted in, and this is like a demon comes to this town, and, like, this monster comes to this town and tricks people and, like, slowly turns people against each other, makes people crazy. And it's all about this town falling apart because they give into their desires and their wicked temptations, and just, like, slowly falling apart, and just through their obsessive needs and or what they think they need. Like, the bad guy in this one doesn't do a lot. He just maybe whispers little things in their ears and is the devil on their shoulder, but they do these horrible things to each other, and that's what these monsters take advantage of. Again, like, the way Stephen King builds these towns and really helps you get to know these people to the point where you actually do feel a little bit of pity for them as they slowly go crazy and become more sinister and more selfish. Like, you really get to know them. And Leland Gaunt is such a compelling villain. He's physically human. I mean, the most terrifying villain that King has created is not a physical monster, not even a supernatural creature, but this human woman, Annie Wilkes. So I would talk about that book, but it's not a chunky book. It's not one of his chunksters. So it's actually one of his smaller books. I mean, it's not that small, but it's still, you know, I think it's shorter than 500 pages. She's the most terrifying villain, I think, because she's a human woman. She's a person. She doesn't have supernatural powers or anything. Like this guy does, Leland Gaunt, but he is, you know. But anyway, he is so terrifying. All he does is to whisper ideas in your head, and he has the shop where he offers you what you think you need. and he takes advantage of your impulses and your secret desires and your greediness. Like, I would be a victim. And again, this is just watching this town slowly fall apart is just so riveting, page turning. You just hope they survive and that they make it out of this. And then, but how does a town recover from what happens in this book? Like, that is just, that's the question I ask once I finish this book. Is like, how is this town going to recover from all this chaos as I'm reading this book? But yeah, this is so good. And I do know there's an adaptation. I haven't watched it yet, but I want to see it. I want to watch it one day. It also, when I was reading this, I kept thinking about Rumpelstiltskin or Mr. Gold in Once Upon a Time as Leland Gaunt. In a more, with this whole, there's always a price for everything. So I kept thinking about him when I was reading this book. I also kept thinking about a mix between him and the Goosebumps, the shopkeeper in the Goosebumps, the Haunted Mask. And I think he was also in Are You for the Dark. As in the episode Train Magic, I think he was the conductor, the ghost conductor. I think it was the same actor. But I kept thinking about him as well, that actor as well, as Leland Gaunt. But mostly Mr. Gold from, like a more dark, sinister version of him. But even more sinister, because of course that was a Disney show, which was more PG-13 rated. But yeah, this was, again, so good. I just love watching stories about towns falling apart. So, the last Stephen King book I'm going to talk about that I love is The Shining, a classic haunted house. Well, it's not even a haunted house, it's a haunted hotel. And, it's funny that you either love the book or you love Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of the book, which is inaccurate to the book. Like, I just recently watched someone who brought this up and said that they prefer the movie adaptation over the book. Like, they were doing it was one of those movies that are better than the book. And in their case, they thought the Stanley Kubrick movie adaptation was better. And Stephen King famously does not love that movie adaptation. He feels like it's not as, it doesn't stay true to his book. And yeah, I can understand what the person in his video, I was Leanne from Leanne's Library, it was her channel. I understand what she was saying. Like, there's some stories that, they work better on screen or you have to change things that will work better on screen. And I think that's the same thing with, like, Lord of the Rings, like, certain thing, or, like, other movie adaptations. There's some situation where they do need to change things because certain things are gonna work better for the screen than the book, and they're not just trying to please. And that's what I always say when I'm always thinking when I'm when I would say to defend the Hobbit movies. Like, yeah, I agree it wasn't necessary to make a third movie. They could have just made into 2 movies if they felt like they needed to, but the book's not that long, so they could have just done 1 movie. But I agree it was a cash grab. But in this case, like, it wasn't just, I also feel like Peter Jackson felt like they needed to please a bigger audience, not just the people who read the book, but a bunch of people. They had to get a lot of butts in the seats. So I feel like some situations they need to make changes or adapt, like add some stuff. And so I bring that up because, like I said, Leanne from Leanne's Library talked about The Shining and that she prefers the Stanley Kubrick movie. But most hardcore Stephen King fans prefer stay true and stay loyal to the book. Now I have watched the movie, but I wasn't entirely paying attention to that movie. And I know there was a movie version that Stephen King made himself that was a lot closer to the book. Okay, that is always so weird. I notice sometimes when I'm filming, all of a sudden this little bubble of a thumbs up or thumbs down will appear. That is so weird. I don't know why it does that. I don't know what that means. But, which is kind of creepy. But anyway, but yeah, The Shining is such a great haunted hotel. It's a slow build. You just see this man slowly going crazy. Like, they hint at the possibility is potential for craziness, but he seems like a normal guy in the beginning, just someone who, has a temper when he gets drunk, which is not normal, but, but it's, showing his perceptibility to being crazy. I do agree that the Stanley Kubrick ending was a little bit more interesting, a little bit more thrilling and exciting than what happens in the book. But, oh my god, this is so creepy and unsettling, and just, again, he's so good with Stephen King is just so good with characters, and just, there's just something about a haunted hotel and the isolation of it. This family is very isolated in this world, and it's just, oh my god, this is just so good. It's hard, again, I struggle with books that I love and really elaborating on why I love them. But yes, this is great, and, I know that it's long. Stephen King writes a lot of chunkster books, but it's just, again, so exciting, and, and I don't know what else to say. I just love it. Okay, so I get 2 more books to go. Oh, of course. Okay, so one is, again, another more recent, and it's a classic, and it's East of Eden by Steinbeck. Again, a more slower book, and these last 2 are both slower books. But seeing, first of all, Steinbeck is so good in describing this place that he loves. Its beauty and its magic and everything. It's not fantasy, but, and it's kind of a retelling of the book of Genesis, but you don't have to read that to really appreciate this. I feel like, I've never read it. I'm just so familiar with it because I grew up hearing about it. So I'm familiar with those stories. And I had cassette tapes as a kid that told the famous Bible stories. So, even though I didn't physically read it, I know it because, as a Christian, I feel like you gotta grow up knowing this stuff, even if you weren't made to read the Bible. But I feel like you can still enjoy the story even if you have never read the book of Genesis. That's just the inspiration for this. It's the Trask family and the Hamilton family, and, this has the most fascinating villain ever, and that is, I cannot remember her name. Let me see, does it say it on here? Oh, crap, doesn't say her name on here, but the woman on here, that she's basically the villain, is so you just, you love her, but you hate her at the same time. She's such a horrible person, but she's so fascinating to read about, and just, she's so evil, and it's so good, and just such compelling characters, and, you wonder what's going to happen to them, and, it's just, again, it's so hard to pinpoint why this is so good, and it's just, I just love it, and, I just, it's a slow going story. It's like I said, it's very slow, but just the way, you just, I'm sorry, I just don't know what else to say, why I love this, like most people do. And I don't expect you to love it necessarily. If you do, that is awesome. If you agree with me, if you don't, that's fine too. I feel like this is not an everybody kind of book. There's a lot of these probably that aren't an everybody kind of book, but yeah, this is a great classic. Okay, let me see if I can grab the last one, because it kind of slipped. out of reach. So, okay, so here's the last one. This is a more recent read. I just fell in love with this. Again, the writing. And I love the smell of this book. The old book smell of this. That is The Weight of Ink by Rachel Kaddish. What made me love this book is it was about an aspect of Jewish history that you don't get a lot about. Like, you hear about the Holocaust, and you might hear about Bible stories, like, the Jews in Egypt and how Moses rescued the Jews from the Pharaoh, and you hear those stories all the time, but you don't. This is during the medieval era, the Black Plague. It has two stories. It has the present day story, or what was the present day when this book was written, and it has the Black Plague storyline. And so, I love books where characters are learning about the past and doing the research, historical research, not science research, but historical research. I love those kinds of, like, I live vicariously through those characters, and it's just, you really feel for these characters. You get attached to them, and you feel bad for them. You want them to get what they want, and you see, seeing the story of our character in this, this Jewish girl, in the way she is treated because she's Jewish, and the prejudice she experiences, and the losses that she experiences, and just her dreams and ambitions being taken from her and having to work so hard to keep them. To keep, someone trying to take them from her, and then she has to work so hard to prove her worth and to keep those dreams alive. And it's such a heart-wrenching story that really gets you in the feels. Like I said, and it's an emotional story, and I feel like, and then there's an emotional story, not just that one, but the story of the woman doing this, the woman doing the research. There's an emotional story there with her, this professor, this older woman who's still struggling with the fact that she's getting older, and her hands don't work as well as they used to. Like, she's, what happens when you get old? You might get arthritis, or I always forget what that is called, but that disease that Michael J. Fox had, where you get the tremors and the uncontrollable shakes. I can't remember I always forget what that is called, but I think she has that. So she's getting older, and people don't take her seriously and are so dismissive of her. And so she is forced to hire someone young to help her do this research and to learn more about the past and about this Jewish person. And so it's, these two women, this girl who's trying to prove herself, as a girl and as a Jewish girl, trying to survive. And then you have this older woman who's, like, she's older, and she's, she's probably not going to live much longer, and she has this illness, and just, she's one last thing that she wants to do, and it's so heartbreaking, but it's such a beautiful story. And like I said, I love seeing characters that do research on the past and trying to, find answers in everything and learn about the past and piece it all together. And it's just so good, and just, like, I just love this. I hope more people read this book, especially because it talks about a period in Jewish history that you don't hear a lot about. You hear about, what's in the Bible and then the Holocaust, but this is a time in Jewish history that you don't get a lot about. But yeah, this was so great, and I love how it's written. I don't know if Rachel Kaddish wrote anything else, but I would love to look it up. I mean, I think she has. I think I did see she wrote other things too, so maybe one day I'll check it out. But yeah, I love this. So those are the tomes I have read, the Chunkie books I have read, and loved, and which is most of them. Most of the Chunkie books I've read, I've loved. What are some Chunkie, have you read? What are 500 plus page books that you have read, and loved? I would love to know what those are from you. Or, I'm also want to do a video on ones that I want to read this year as well. So are there any that I mean, unless you want to comment with that this other video that I'm planning on doing. Just tell me what are the Chunkie books you have read, and what are your favorites. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, and click the bell notification button below if you want to be notified about my latest videos. And I hope you are enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!